Good evening. I would like to welcome you to the Krasno Global Events Series. It's wonderful to see so many of you here again for our event on the end of the Merkel era and the future of the Berlin Republic. It's a great pleasure to welcome our special guests today who all join us from Germany. There's Jana Puglierin of the European Council on Foreign Relations. There's Michael Backfisch of the Funke Mediengruppe and Stefan Kornelius of the Sueddeutsche Zeitung. I'm sure we will all have a very enlightening evening. I'm Klaus Larres. I'm the Regional and Krasno Distinguished Professor of History and International Affairs here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I've been organizing the Krasno Global Affairs Series since 2012. As you know, the Krasno Event Series at UNC always deals with issues of global concerns. We have a website, a very exciting website that is krasnoevents.com, and we have a YouTube channel that is youtube.com/KrasnoUNC. And please sign up for our mailing list via the website or by simply sending me an email. Tonight, each of our guests will talk for 10 minutes or so, and they then will ask a few questions to each of them. And after that, we open it up to you and your questions from the audience. And please be so kind as to submit your questions again in writing via the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And our two Krasno assistants today, that is Laurel Freit and Brianna Weaver, they will ask and they will select and then ask the questions aloud. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you tonight to our Krasno event at UNC on Is Germany Becoming Unpredictable? The End of the Merkel Era and the Future of the Berlin Republic. Our first speaker tonight is Stefan Kornelius. Stefan is a well-known German journalist who is political editor of the Sueddeutsche Zeitung, one of Germany's largest daily newspapers. Stefan has also authored a very successful biography of Angela Merkel. In his previous life, among many other things, Stefan Kornelius was US correspondent and bureau chief for the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Washington, D.C. He has also covered the chancellorship of Helmut Kohl and Germany's defense policy and the politics of the Christian Democrats, and that is the party of Helmut Kohl and Angela Merkel. Tonight, Stefan Kornelius will enlighten us above all about the successes and failures of Angela Merkel's politics. We will talk about what is her legacy in politics, because she's going to retire within the next few months. And Stefan Kornelius will also enlighten us about transatlantic relations. It's a very much appreciated, Stefan, that you could make it tonight. Over to you. Hi, Stefan. Stefan has disappeared. Somehow we seem to have lost him. Just wait a minute, whether he shows up again. Let me see where he has disappeared. Well, I guess we should go to our second speaker and wait for Stefan until he comes back in a few minutes, hopefully. Our other speaker tonight from Berlin is Michael Backfisch. And Michael is a senior journalist and international editor at the Funke Mediengruppe. The Funke Mediengruppe is Germany's largest newspaper group with 12 influential daily newspapers, which altogether have a circulation of over 1.4 million copies a day. The newspapers Michael works with are, for example, the Berliner Morgenpost and the Hamburger Abendblatt and the Westdeutsche Allgemeine Zeitung. In his previous life, Michael was correspondent and bureau chief in Washington, D.C. for the business daily Handelsblatt and also for the Financial Times the German Financial Times. And he also was Middle East correspondent in Dubai for both the Handelsblatt and the German Financial Times. He has interviewed many leading American politicians, including George W. Bush, and he has written a book about the complex economics of the Middle East. Tonight, he will talk to us about the post-Merkel government scenarios in Germany. What might be the future German government look like? What are the coalition combinations which are possible? And he will also tell us about Germany's foreign policy activities. Michael, thank you very much for being able to make it tonight. I hope you're still with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, good afternoon across the Atlantic, and I'm here. I will talk briefly about three major points this afternoon. Our first one would be discussing three major coalition scenarios which might be possible after the election, September 26th. Secondly, major issues of German foreign policy and potential areas of conflict between the parties. And thirdly, about the potential chancellors and chancellor candidates. So let's upload the PowerPoint, please. Okay. So in Germany, as you know, we have a system of proportional representation. Please, next slide, please. By tradition, next slide, please. By tradition, there are exactly coalition governments. Please go back to the first slide. Yes, thank you. Each party has a color. So the first coalition scenario would be a black-green coalition, which is a moderately pro-business environmentalist approach. Black stands for the Conservative Christian Democratic Party, and with its strong Bavarian wing, the CSU, and green obviously stands for the Green Party. Black-green right now, according to the polls, would have a comfortable majority of about 55%. It would be the most spicy coalition constellation, and it would be a premiere on the national level in Germany. 30, 40 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that a Green Party enters a national government in Germany. The top figures from the left is Armin Laschet. He's the head of the Christian Democratic Union. Next to him is the head of the Bavarian wing of the Christian Democrats, Conservative Party. He's also Bavarian Prime Minister, and the Bavarian Prime Minister always plays a very important role in German politics. On the right are the two party chiefs of the Green Party. That's Robert Habeck and Annalena Baerbock. It's not yet sure who will be the Chancellor candidate of the Greens, Robert Habeck or Annalena Baerbock. But I have a slight hunch that it will be Annalena Baerbock because she would be the woman within a field dominated by men, and I think that would be an added value for the Greens. So next slide, please. The second scenario would be a so-called red-red-green coalition, which would have a left-wing environmentalist approach. Red-red, that means two leftist parties. One, Social Democratic Party, would be moderate, and the second, the left party, would be more radical. And the Greens, obviously, with an environmental approach. In general, the political coordinates would change in Germany dramatically along the lines: higher taxes for the rich, more payments for the poor, and restraint towards military missions abroad. The figures on the part of the Social Democrats, that Olaf Scholz on the left side, he's the finance minister, a pragmatic politician, and he's accompanied by two more leftist party members, the party chiefs Norbert Walter-Borjans and Saskia Esken. In the middle is the leadership of the left party, which I will skip because in a few weeks they will change the leadership, so it's not worthwhile talking about the past. And the Green Party chiefs you already know, Robert Habeck and Annalena Baerbock. Next slide, please. The third scenario would be the grand coalition of the Christian Democrats and Social Democrats. It would be more of the same. Mathematically speaking, they would have a majority right now, according to the polls, but it's less likely that we'll have a grand coalition again. Why? Because since 2005, we have this coalition with Angela Merkel, with the exception of 4 years between 2009 and 2013. The top figures you already know are Armin Laschet and Markus Söder from the Conservative Christian Democrats, and the SPD figures we already introduced. Next slide, please. Well, The top issues of German foreign policy obviously depend, how German foreign policy looks like depends on the coalition, and it depends on the Chancellor. Nevertheless, we can talk a little bit about the dynamics of the issues. And of course, with regard to transatlantic relations, there is great hope across the board and a great relief that Joe Biden won. It's a great hope that the United States will return to a pragmatic course, leaving behind the policy of polarization of Donald Trump, and a great hope that the alliances are valued again, international as well as international treaties and organizations. So across the board, it's relief. Green Party, they will stress very much climate policy, and they are very hopeful that Joe Biden might be on their side in creating a transformation of the economy towards renewable energy and leaving fossil energies behind. Of course, there are two major topics which are very contentious. It's Russia and it's China. And German-Russian relations have changed dramatically with the Navalny case. Alexei Navalny is the most prominent opposition politician in Russia. He was poisoned by the nerve agent Novichok in August last year. He was medically treated in Germany, and he was arrested upon his arrival to Russia. So there is a tough talk in German politics about sanctioning Russia, punishing Putin for attacking the political opposition in Russia. But this tough talk is not matched by actions. The Dutch paper, the Volkskrant, framed it very nicely, I think. I'm just quoting two phrases, quote, "To censure, but at the same time to remain on speaking terms, and above all, to do business. This strategy is deeply rooted in both the Social Democratic Party and the Christian Democratic Party." This stance is already also reflected in the natural gas pipeline between Russia and Germany called Nord Stream 2. There is a conflict of the parties, Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, Left Party on the one side, and then the Green Party on the other side. The Green Party is the only party which across the board wants to stop the pipeline project, because they say we have to put limits to Vladimir Putin in order to stop him to attacking the political opposition. They favor what they call a value-driven foreign policy. The same conflict line you see in the relation Germany-China. It's also human rights versus economy. This is the same conflict line as in the relation with Russia. There is also tough talk in Germany with regard to the new Chinese security law in Hong Kong, Beijing's aggressive posture in the South China Sea, Taiwan, but it is not matched by concrete actions. The only party which across the board does this is the Green Party. They're pleading for a tougher course vis-a-vis China, and they do not exclude sanctions. The Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, for them, economic relations are prevalent, and they stress that China is Germany's most important trading partner, so we should not damage these relations. The role of Europe, of course, is moderately contentious. Everybody is European in these days, even though the enthusiasm which French President Emmanuel Macron put forward after being elected in 2017 is not shared by all political parties in Germany. It's also the Greens and parts of the SPD who are for more integration in Europe, for a bigger Eurozone budget as put forward by Emmanuel Macron. Next slide, please. So who will become the next Chancellor? The two conservative candidates, Armin Laschet and Markus Söder, they said that they will decide in March or April. Armin Laschet, the new head of the Christian Democratic Union, he was elected a few weeks ago. He was underestimated, and he made his way up and pulled it off against strong competitors. Armin Laschet is a Merkel-like candidate, moderate in style, looking for compromise, integration, building bridges. And Markus Söder, conversely, started out as very conservative, but has become very adaptable lately. And he gained in the polls by posing as the strong man in the corona crisis. In 2018, he still was very conservative. He tried to lure the voters of the extreme right for his party, the Bavarian Christian Democratic Party. In the meantime, he has changed. He has become even a little bit green. So Armin Laschet, vis-a-vis Russia, he has been tagged as being soft on Russia. And in March 2014, when after Russia had occupied Crimea, he said there is a, quote, marketable anti-Putin populism, end of quote, even though the referendum on Crimea was contrary to international law. He defended Russia several times, and he also defends the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline project. So in this, there might be an area of conflict with the Green Party, which is strongly against this project. Markus Söder favors a black-green coalition. He says it's an exciting future team because the Green Party addresses the most central challenge of a new federal German government, that is the fighting climate change. His courting campaign vis-a-vis the Green Party was not shared by the Green Party. They were rather restraintful because they wanted to raise their price. Söder today, I read, is prioritizing a coalition with the Free Democratic Party, the Liberal Party in Germany. So he is open for several options, and this underlines his flexibility and adaptability as a politician. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's very illuminating. So speculate a little. Who will be the next German Chancellor? Might it even be a person from the Green Party? Is the chairman, the Chancellor candidate, possibly from the Green Party?
If we have a red-red-green coalition between the Green Party, the Social Democratic Party, and the Left Party, there is a high likelihood that there will be a Green Chancellor. Then we will have a leftist German government because the Left Party will push for higher taxes for the wealthy. They will push for more payments to the poor and to address inequality of salaries. In this case, yes, if we have a black-green coalition, it's rather unlikely. But the Green Party right now has around 20%. So that's pretty good. And there is one state in Germany where they have the prime minister, and this is Baden-Württemberg in southwestern Germany. It's the home of Daimler. It's the home of Porsche. It's the home of the famous German Mittelstand. So it's amazing that a green prime minister is governing economically well-off state. So I would say if it's black-green, it will be either Laschet or Söder. Söder, the Bavarian prime minister, is testing the waters. And if the polls are very good in spring, I think he might run.
But a Bavarian candidate has never actually won an election. Will that be different with Söder?
It's always the first time at a certain point. Well, that has to play out. Söder is trying to polish his edges. As I mentioned, he was a rather conservative politician in the past, and he tried to move a little bit toward the center. He tried to be a little bit more environmentalist. You know, he had a campaign of saving the bees, which is actually a green issue. So he's trying to appeal to the middle ground of German politics. So this underlines his ambition, but he will not run, he will not try if the polls are not very good. And Armin Laschet, the head of the Christian Democrats, he's very ambitious and he goes for it.
All right. So in principle, what you're saying is that Germany is ready for Bavarian candidate if the polls, if the developments go on as they are at the moment. Let me just ask you, before we turn to Stefan Kornelius, let me ask you, what about the future of the Social Democrats? That is one of the traditional German parties, over 100 years old, one of the big, large people's parties in Germany, but they are now on 15% or less. So are they going to disappear? What is their future?
Well, that's a good question. The French Socialist Party, which was also a very big party, it nearly disappeared. And the Social Democratic in Germany talks a lot about their proud past because the present is rather gloomy. The Social Democratic Party, as a matter of fact, was very successful in pushing through their issues in the Grand Coalition, with a little caveat that the social policy was credited for Chancellor Merkel and not for the Social Democratic Party. So they pushed through their issues in raising the minimum wage, in having social payments and more money for the foster homes. But actually, Angela Merkel got the credit. It was a deadly embrace from her part, and there was no room for the Social Democrats.
So the future for them is bright or not?
The future for them, I don't see it bright, because they either become left, more left, but then they occupy the space of the left party. So this is actually, it's not a win situation for them. And if they go to the middle ground, they are in the space of the Christian Democrats. I do not see a successful added value for them in the current political spectrum. So the future is not bright. I don't see it bright.
Okay, we will talk about the AfD and the right, I'm sure, a little later. Let me turn to Stefan Kornelius. I'm glad you managed to get back. We lost you for a minute. I introduced you already, and Stefan would like to enlighten us about the legacy of Angela Merkel. What were her successes and failures? And of course, she's the most popular German politician, particularly abroad. Is that popularity actually justified?
Well, sorry for disappearing. My system broke down, which gives me a nice lead into my topic, because one thing which didn't break down was the German system over the past 16 years. Indeed, this is now the moment where we do reflect on Angela Merkel's legacy, on what did she achieve, on how did she manage German power, what does she leave for the world, is there a message, what is it about this most powerful woman of the world. The Merkel era, and I think we can talk about an era, 16 years in power is quite something in these days. Honestly, actually for German standards, not that much. Remember Helmut Kohl, who was in power for 16 years, Adenauer, even longer. I mean, well, almost longer. But I mean, Germany has a tradition of long-serving chancellors, and it basically serves to the need of the country, the desire for stability and for continuity. And Merkel, in that respect, served her country pretty well. She provided stability and continuity as probably no one else could have had in these very turbulent times. She led a government, led various governments, mostly with the Social Democrats, which were providing what Germans probably value most, which is economic stability and sort of moderate but sort of foreseeable growth and change. Don't disturb sort of our environment. And in that respect, Germany was quite the exemption of all Western democracies in the past 16 years, because it's probably the only country which wasn't hit by one of those tsunamis, which you all saw, mostly labeled as populists or collapse of governments, populism waves, economic turndowns. Remember 2008 when the world economic crisis hit and the euro crisis followed on. Germany left that crisis in pretty good shape. So there are a couple of stepping stones in those 16 years where you can pretty much assume or claim that Angela Merkel governed successfully. But why is she so sort of unremarkable in that governing, and why is she so almost boring? There is no big initiative, there is no big sort of vision thing, no European new model which she brought out. Well, that's her trade, and that's probably one of the reasons why she was able to cling on to power for such a long time. If you expose yourself too forcefully, if you play with your ideas too strongly, if you are always in the offensive argumentatively, you abuse, you spend your capital, your political capital. That's something she never did. Angela Merkel was a pretty screwed politician in terms of handling power. She's very power affine. She knows how to, she senses how power would disappear from her, and she has a very good instinct in getting rid of problems which could sort of stop her from exercising her power. So in the end, the 16 years were marked by stability, by, well, economic growth and stability, by political predictability, and by the absence of chaotic or unpredictable situations. What are the failures in those years? Well, there was a lot of talk that she let down the southern rim in, during the Euro crisis. I think this claim is wrong because in the end, Angela Merkel was out to save the euro. Remember, we faced a situation where the markets basically bet against the stability of the euro. And if that would have been allowed to happen, there wouldn't be a European currency anymore. Second situation, probably the refugee crisis in 2015, which led to the rise of a new right wing in Germany. Comparable now with some distance, we can say, well, this is pretty similar to what we see all over Europe. These kinds of right-wing populism is now a common feature of the Western democratic world. Nevertheless, Angela Merkel was in a very tough situation, basically between a stone and a hard place. She had to choose whether to fend back those refugees, which was basically physically impossible, causing even more trouble on the way, let's say on the Balkans. She was even talking of war at that time. And on the other side, giving into this big demand of humanitarian aid or humanitarian attitude, which she then in the end proved to be right. Those people wanted to come to Germany because this was the country of their desire. It was rich. And she tried to find a middle way, finding the agreement with Turkey, in the end stabilizing situation. But the migration issue will be a lasting issue for all our Western societies. The biggest issue, which we probably can see, is populism. The rise of populism, which was impersonated with the American President Donald Trump, probably started with Berlusconi in Italy, but then saw its course all over Europe, and the United States was pretty much a feature where we all who value stable democratic systems were a bit frightened on how stable those systems actually are. Well, the German systems, designed after World War II and after the experience of the Nazi regime, proved to be extremely stable. Party system, the way we vote, the way parliament is assembled, the way leaders are chosen. And Michael just talked about it. This is a very predictable process. You just can't buy your way up. This system proved stable, but Merkel also rose to the occasion, and she took the helm. She took the lead in holding up the values of that Western democratic system, which gave her, which brought her the title of sort of the last remaining leader of the Western world. I think is a little bit overstretched to some extent, but nevertheless, she was a female leader, a beacon. Let me come to the final point, which I think is the most important one, and it's one which is tells us a lot about Germany's role in the world. In those past 16 years, Germany's role in Europe has grown from, well, a sort of a medium-sized power, which yielded this power in accordance with France, with Britain, with all the other major players in Europe, within the European Union, to a country right now in 2021, where Germany is undoubtedly the leading power in this continent and in the framework of the European Union. This is not by choice, this is not by desire, this is not by power grab. It's by probably the gravity of power, by events. Look at the French development with rather weak precedent. Look at the British decision to choose Brexit. Look at geography. Germany in the center of Europe with a very strong and emerging Eastern European member states, which are economically booming. So Germany is by geography, probably by size, but also by leadership, now the predominant power in Europe. But historically seen, that was always sort of the nightmare of Europe, the cauchemar européen, the moment where war arose. Balancing was the natural reflex in Europe. Countries ganging up against Germany. It didn't happen under Merkel's reign. She managed to assemble as much trust and credibility to lead the European Union in this extremely unstable and challenging times, united and steady. Well, we can argue the European Union didn't make those big jumps ahead. There wasn't that really move towards a unified, even nation state of Europe. No, it's not happening. But on the other side, there were those contrary fractures. There's this power against the European Union trying to bring it apart. But Angela Merkel was probably the one in the end who, through countless council meetings, managed to keep the union together. And this is the probably most important asset Europe and Germany does have in times where we are facing now ourselves versus two, one rising and one existing superpower, which are playing off against each other, and where Europe has to find its place somewhere in between or with someone on the other side. So this is probably the most important legacy she will leave behind. Germany being a leader which is accepted and not a threat to Europe. And being a leader which probably has its doubts what to do with that kind of might and power, but on the other side, which is able, hopefully for the good, to bring it in with a new chancellor.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's most interesting. But let me ask you, wouldn't that have happened that, a new German leadership role in Europe, wouldn't that have happened under any chancellor? Is that really Angela Merkel's doing? As you said, population, then geographical location, and also the developments like populist developments in other countries. So wouldn't the Germans have always followed that path?
Absolutely right, yes, it probably would have happened, but what probably would not have happened is that kind of acceptance of Germany being such a leader. It depends very much on the character and on the political skills of the German chancellor to be an accepted leader in Europe, someone who is a mediator of power and not one who grabs power and not one who pushes others around. Merkel really rose this art of waiting for decisions, sitting things out and waiting until the ultimate moment and not giving any hint of her choice to the ultimum. I mean, she was the ultimate balancer in Europe. And this is an art. I mean, in German history, you saw Bismarck trying it his way, balancing, and twice it went really awfully wrong, even more often. I think she learned these historic lessons. It must be deeply entrenched in all political leaders' minds in Germany that there is this constant danger of Germany going awry. Germany being the unpredictable, big sort of the European hegemon in the middle of it. And that's the situation which desperately has to be avoided.
Mm-hmm. It is often said that Merkel, by shifting her party to the left and her government to the left, she ruined the SPD, but because of her immigration policy, she enabled the AfD, the very far right, and made them more popular than they otherwise would be. Is this correct?
I think Merkel is not an ideologue. She's never been an ideologue. She was always, remember when she came up in politics, she joined the Demokratische Aufbruch, an East German political movement, which was center somewhere. And she was never sort of a staunch conservative nor a leftist person. She sympathized with the Greens all the time. So what she did, yes, she moved society to the left, but I think that was a kind of a zeitgeist thing. This is something which happened anywhere, all over the Western societies. We all had same-sex marriages. We all had this kind of openings all over the past 16 years. What she couldn't avoid is with all those coalitions, which Michael talked about, which are necessary in the German logic. She had to go she had to find sort of a common ground with the Social Democrats, which moved the party naturally to the left. I just touched on the migrant issue earlier, and I sort of tried to hint that it's not entirely by her choice what happened. I think she was driven, mostly driven, and she probably reacted well, but she didn't have many choices. She couldn't fend those people off. She couldn't shoot at them. She couldn't flush them back with water cannons. She thought about the impacts on the Balkans and even in Turkey and Syria. So at that moment, she didn't have much of a choice than to bring them in. Naturally, that caused a huge backlash, and mostly in the East. And what we saw right after that migrational incident, but even before, is this constant and still ongoing split in German electoral and even overall society between East and West. If you look at the maps and how people vote, even in how they infect themselves, in how they approve vaccination, and how they, I mean, this is still East and West. This is still the legacy of the division.
Thank you. That brings me to the point of Germany being apparently or allegedly an efficient country and well organized, and all these stereotypes. When you look at the vaccine situation in Germany right now, you can't see much organizational skill or much efficiency either. Is that Merkel's fault, or what is the situation right now?
Well, again, I'd love to differentiate on this, because it's not entirely right or wrong. Yes, Germany is sort of in the big chunk of countries which is now at whatever one-digit percentage of vaccination level. There are 2 countries or 3 actually are leaning out. That's Britain, that's the US, that's Israel. Why? I mean, they have special contracts. They implored sort of warlike laws, which gave them the opportunity to shelf those vaccines first. Germany wasn't able to, because first of all, we didn't have the production facilities, and second, the European Union acted unilaterally. Just think 1 second what would have happened if Germany would have bought all these vaccines unilaterally at the very moment where the country went into the EU presidency mode, which was the past half year, where the EU budget was decided, the EU Corona aid package was decided, tons of other issues, Brexit included. You would have made immediate enemies. So that was politically not a choice. Could Merkel or could anybody else had or acted better? Yes, definitely. I mean, the country is slow moving, and what we're seeing at this moment right now is this kind of procrastination of bureaucracy, of the lack of digitalization. A lot of things which we call modernization things have to be done, and that's one of the bad legacies of Merkel. That's one of the failures she really has to stand for. The country drags behind in many fields.
Thank you. Just a quick final question. What is she going to do when she's retiring in probably October of this year? Is she going to write her memoirs and do nothing? Or is she going to take a big international or other job? Maybe an industry job, who knows?
No, that's what she definitely doesn't want to do. Not an industry job. Well, quite honestly, the most striking feature right now is the absence of legacy building. She's not doing anything to prevent, to enhance any kind of legacy mode. She's not giving interviews. She's not standing for any kind of documentaries. She's not joining to write a book. And I mean, nothing's in the making, and no memoirs either. What she always said is she will go to sleep, and when she wakes up, she decides. I think she's extremely honest on this, and I could envision something like an academic thing. There was always talk that she could bring in those universities which gave her an honorable doctorate, bring them together in a kind of Merkel network, and do what she always liked to do most, academic work.
Right, thanks very much. And that means we are coming to our third and final speaker today. That is Dr. Jana Puglierin. And Jana is the director of the Berlin office of the important European Council of Foreign Relations. She also is in charge of the Council's Rethink Europe initiative. Prior to her present position, she was at the German Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin and an advisor on disarmament, arms control, and non-proliferation for the German Bundestag, the German parliament. She received a PhD from the University of Bonn, not far from where I'm coming from, where I was born. And she also taught transatlantic relations in Bonn. Jana did many other interesting things, including spending various stints on fellowships and similar in Washington, D.C. And tonight, Jana will talk to us about German foreign policy, the current state of affairs, and the future of transatlantic relations, and perhaps the future of Germany's complex relations with both Russia and China. Over to you, Jana, and thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you very much, and good evening from Berlin. I was asked to talk about German foreign policy in the late Merkel era, and also kind of in the run-up of the election for parliament, and maybe to do some glass ball reading of what comes afterwards. I will basically, I think, copy many things that Michael and Stefan have already said, but maybe I can add another perspective here or there. So on foreign policy, during the last 4 years of the so-called Grand Coalition that Michael explained previously. So it seems right now like a faraway time, but a year ago, exactly a year ago, I joined the European Council on Foreign Relations, and I wrote my first commentary not on COVID, but on basically the paralysis of the Grand Coalition in foreign policy. So a year ago, before Merkel's approval ratings actually peaked again and are now sky high still, approval for the work of the Grand Coalition was at an all-time low. The coalition was very popular, and Merkel herself was not very popular either. The Greens had a wave of success. The CDU and the SPD were at a record low. And what was most important, that from the very beginning of the Grand Coalition, basically the Grand Coalition had to take care of not falling apart. There were numerous occasions when they had so much infighting, especially also in the beginning between the two conservative sister parties, that that there was constant talk about early elections, about and then Merkel basically also stepped down as a party leader, and Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer took over. So there was a lot of internal movement, and the victim of all this, I think, was foreign policy. So there was little sense of that spirit of, awakening that you could have seen watching Berlin in the years after 2014. So when the first of those two grand coalitions that followed each other came into place, Putin just kind of a couple of months later annexed Crimea, and there was this big Munich Security Conference event where our back then president of the country, Ursula von der Leyen, who was back then our defense minister, and our then foreign minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, announced that Germany had now basically finally understood that the country needs to take more international responsibility, needs to step up, needs to lead more, including on military missions. And in the years that followed from that, there was actually a lot of change going on, and a lot of taboos were broken. And Germany was actually, the topic of foreign policy was quite present, and Germany, I think, was stepping up quite a bit. I mean, not compared to the huge challenges, but compared to where we have been before. But already during the election campaign for the Grand Coalition, the second one when parliamentarians wanted to get re-elected, actually, especially security and defense policy became a contested issue. The problem, I think, and we touched upon this, was that Merkel shifted the CDU so much towards the SPD that the SPD had problems to identify areas where it could be unique and could be attractive for its voters and make a difference. And the SPD identified security and defense policy already during the election campaign. Politicians from the SPD back then said, oh, we cannot spend 2% for Donald Trump, that crazy idiot in the White House. And that's a true quote. And so basically, security and defense policy became a toxic topic in this coalition government and became highly controversial. The problem was that nothing moved, basically, coming back to the paralysis. So both the CDU, CSU at the one hand and the SPD basically were constantly fighting about what they wanted to do, but never really taking any decisions. That's true when it comes to nuclear sharing, which was and still is a big debate in this coalition government, when it comes to armed drones, when it comes to arms exports, when it comes to military missions, when it comes to the issue of defense spending more broadly. So to me personally, it felt as if the government has basically hit some sort of snooze button after the Grand Coalition got re-elected on foreign policy. And people felt, I think, quite comfortable with this idea that Germany had done so much more in previous years and is showing more responsibility and is more active. And people, I think, basically also thought that this was now enough and now other issues were important again. So we saw Germany as a status quo loving country, and Germany, I think, has always been never kind of a revolutionary country. We as Germans, we love the status quo, and the status quo, as Stefan has alluded, has served as well as Germans. So everybody else in the EU was in crisis, but Germany was thriving. So I think, and also basically on Russia, yeah, we saw kind of, I mean, not big changes. We basically followed the path that we had taken after 2014. We had debates about easing sanctions from some politicians, but I think basically Germany stayed firm and had this double course that Michael alluded to of agreeing to do Nord Stream 2 on the one hand, and at the other hand, Merkel keeping the EU together on sanctions. So that was this double strategy, and Germany was very big on the idea of selective engagement. And yeah, when it comes to China, I think Michael or Stefan have said this already. Merkel basically had an idea that economy trumps security or human rights, and it was very business oriented. And although she constantly also, I don't know, visited human rights activists in China, the emphasis was always more on the economy. And so, yeah, that's basically the big lines. And I think I personally fear that looking into the future, it might well be that not much will change, because the CDU has just elected Armin Laschet. Michael explained this. Armin Laschet is basically was the status quo candidate amongst the candidates that were running. He is the one, I think, closest to Merkel in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to China. He has expressed some strange foreign policy ideas, not very much in sync with the CDU on Syria. And also more or less on Russia, but in many ways, he's the status quo candidate. He has defended Nord Stream 2. He has defended to work with, or not to exclude Huawei from the 5G network in Germany. So he's very much, I think, Merkel in a suit, basically, with some different shades of being more, being closer to President Macron and the French in general, but overall. And I think if change in Germany is happening, looking at the scenarios that Michael presented, I think that the Greens might be the ones who will be driving it. I don't see Armin Laschet changing German foreign policy significantly. If the Greens enter the government, they have a very hawkish position, I would say, on Russia by now, not so much in the military sphere, but they have a huge emphasis on human rights and democracy and understand the challenge quite well. They are against Nord Stream 2. They are against including Huawei, and on China and Russia, I see them much closer to positions in Washington than Armin Laschet at the moment. But in security and defense, we will basically face the very same problems. The Greens don't like armed drones. They don't want to buy them. They don't want to replace the Tornado and continue nuclear sharing. They don't like arms exports. They are very skeptical when it comes to military missions, and they also reject the idea to spend 2% on defense. So I think that will remain a very, very difficult issue. So to conclude, I think you haven't seen much foreign policy initiatives coming from Berlin lately. Maybe you can highlight this engagement in Libya to organize this Libya conference, but I think you could not see, you could see basically not many new ideas or coming from Berlin. It was basically business as usual. I think Germany felt quite comfortable also when it comes to the conflict between China and the US to muddle through and to just not take sides and sit on the fence and try not to get dragged into that conflict. That might no longer be possible, but that's for Germany a very uncomfortable position. Maybe last word on the Biden administration. There is huge relief in Berlin. People are very positive. They want to engage with the Biden administration, at least rhetorically. But people also feel a little insecure or are in doubt what's happening in the United States and with the United States as a global leader. I have heard many officials privately saying that they are worried what happens 4 years from now, whether we see an interim period and whether Biden is the true outlier and not Trump. So I think there is people are aware that this is a huge chance and also a huge challenge. I don't know if Germany is ready to really take that chance and to really do more and offer something. We had a bad start with the comprehensive agreement on investment with China. I think that was really starting on the wrong foot. And Nord Stream 2 remains a very difficult topic where we now have to find a face-saving compromise. So I hope that Germany is ready, but I don't see it ready in many ways to really be a good partner for the United States to lead the West again, or anew, not again. And with that, I leave it.
No, thank you very much indeed. Most interesting. So what you're saying, it sounds a bit like, is that on the surface, transatlantic relations have been revived, and things are going back to some sort of transatlantic harmony. But beneath the surface, there are problems which are enduring, like, for example, the defense contribution. Trump, as you know, insisted on 2%. And Biden is most likely to insist on the 2% GDP percentage points for the NATO members' national defense as well. And there's a lot of resistance in Germany, as far as I know, about increasing that from 1.2% right now to 2%. At the same time, the German army, German tanks, German helicopters are kind of not working very well. Many of them are out of commission or are being repaired. So how is that going to be resolved?
I think the whole area of security and defense spending, military missions, is a difficult topic in Germany. It's just a difficult topic in parliament. It's not only the Green Party, it's also the SPD, the Left Party. And I just wrote a piece about actually that this is also Merkel's fault, because Merkel never really made publicly the argument why Germany really needs to change course here and really needs to bring more to the plate. She gave several speeches, including in that famous speech she gave in a beer tent where she said, we cannot completely rely on our American friends any longer. We need to do more, but she never specified what that do more concretely means and what it costs. And she never prepared the German government and the German population. And maybe, she was so popular, she still is, and she never used her political capital to push these topics forward. She never took an interest in them. That was never her comfort zone. She never liked these topics. She did not do any harm or damage, but she just ignored these topics by and large. And so you really have difficulties to find, in the Conservative Party, the consensus is still, yes, we need to spend 2%, but a lot of experts, and also rightly so, in my opinion, question this number. And the German public, my think tank just did a poll in Europe, a survey in 11 European countries and also in Germany. And we asked about, is there a need for the American security guarantee, for example? And in Germany, the number of those people that said, yeah, there is a great need and kind of we need that protection was lowest amongst the countries that we have polled. So it remains very complicated. The German, and it's also some sort of blame game. The politicians always say, oh, well, the German population is not ready to support this and there is strong opposition. But then you could also argue that it's the politicians' basically task to change that and to explain it better. And so, yes, in some, I think it will be difficult. I think the tone will be better. And Germany has been stepping up, as I said, in NATO after 2014 significantly. But now with COVID and the huge recovery fund expenses and all this, I mean, on the positive side, we are now spending basically 1.5% because our GDP just got lower, but that is not a solution. I don't see us spending 2% in the near and distant future.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the departure of Britain from the EU has put more pressure on Germany to fill that kind of security and military leadership as the British always executed within the Western alliance and also within the EU, or do you think Brexit doesn't really matter in the end?
Brexit made some progress in EU defense possible. Well, you can be very critical with that progress, whether that is really progress or just institutional cosmetics, but Brexit eased the way for the French and the Germans to push forward some EU defense initiatives, which have been launched basically in 2016 and have been developing in the years afterwards. And there, maybe one could also give Germany some credit. Germany was very active in developing this kind of EU security landscape. But the problem is that these projects so far don't make a real difference when it comes to the ability of Germany to contribute and to really kind of defend Europe. Our armed forces are in a desperate state. And so, yeah, I think, but I think even before the Brits were leaving, there was this pressure on Germany. I mean, this is what we in Germany hear for a long time now, that that Germany needs to do more. I still remember Radek Sikorski, who was back then Minister of Defense in Poland in 2011, who gave a talk in Berlin that he was more afraid of Germany doing not enough and of a weak Germany than of a strong Germany. And Americans always ask me, so what needs to change? I mean, what needs to happen that you change your position? And they then say, well, Russia has annexed Crimea, and that did not lead you to changing your mind significantly. And I said, yeah, well, it did. Look at the baby steps that we did. And so I think what we will see in Germany is just inching forward in that area. And of course, there is huge pressure, but I just don't see us changing our attitude overnight. I don't see us becoming a power like France or the UK. At
least there's some degree of forward. That is something, I guess.
Yes, inching, yeah. I think it's at least progress, no?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Let me ask all of our three speakers before opening it to questions from the audience about the big question of our times. That really, as far as German foreign policy is concerned, that really is Germany's relationship with the United States and Germany's relationship with China, and how the Germans balance that, or whether they need to balance it at all. And that seems to be a crucial question. Michael, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it's clear that you hear me.
Yes.
Yes. There is great expectation to the US administration, although German diplomats do not know yet exactly what Mr. Biden is up to. He had some rhetoric vis-a-vis China. He said that China is a competitor, or is an extreme competitor, but it's not an adversary. So it was not the same quality of tough talk of Donald Trump. Also vis-a-vis Iran, which is a very important topic in the Middle East, the return to the nuclear agreement. It's not yet quite clear what the US administration is up to. But it's also evident that there is no equidistance between Germany and the US on one side and Germany and China on the other side. It's clear that the transatlantic relation is preeminent. And it's also clear that Germany has to do something in order to have a clear position vis-a-vis China. They cannot just muddle through as they tried to do in the past. They promoted Wirecard, this fraudulent company in China a year ago or so when Merkel was in China, and I think the staff of Merkel, around Merkel, they didn't check exactly what Wirecard was about, and they were a little bit too naive in this respect. So with regard to the investment agreement with China, I'm not so tough as Jana, because this agreement was negotiated for 7 years. That's, the big investment agreements take a long time. So that was before Trump when it was started. But it's clear we have to go shoulder to shoulder with the US, although it's not yet quite clear what Mr. Biden is up to. Germany is waiting, but maybe that's also not the right approach. Maybe they should approach Mr. Biden and make propositions. Well, this is our contribution, in order to just follow and to react.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, do you have any thoughts on US-China relationship and how Germany stands?
Well, Germany's US relations were marked by almost 70 years of huge continuity and predictability, and the Trump administration all destroyed that. The big question now is how much of that predictability or reliability will come back, and can we only sort of plan for the next 4 years, and are we then back to square one with everything on for toss? So I guess the answer has to be provided from Washington first. I do see all efforts from the Biden administration to give those answers, and I have no doubt that we'll be back in sort of the calm waters of joint foreign policy making and decision making. But nevertheless, this kind of uncertainty lingers over this relationship, and it has to be addressed, because a country like the United States cannot abstain from foreign policy, or cannot act as unpredictable as it did during the Trump term. It's simply too big. There's always that weird assumption that there would be some kind of isolationist tendency in the US. I don't see that happen, because the US cannot simply isolate. It's a given in the world. It's huge, it's big, it's powerful, it's military, it's might again. So China is another big. Germany was lured into this huge economic bonanza, which the country used to quite an excess. The German car industry is relying heavily on this market, also on the Asian market. The luxury brands are going up. We just 2 days ago had the news that the trade relations with China and the EU actually bypassed the transatlantic trade relations. So in terms of volume, so there's a big white elephant there. The question is, will we be lured by the money, or do we see the inherent systemic competition which is between China and the EU? And it is there. It is a competition. It's not an alliance. It's not a partnership. And I do see a big deficit within the German government, but also within the European Union operatives to address this kind of clash. We do see there is sort of a kind of tactical thing taking place right now with the EU-China investment agreement, which was agreed upon shortly after Christmas. And that agreement sort of could give the European Union a little bit more wiggling room towards China, but also towards the US. I think sort of the Berlin path would be to find a way where we can constructively engage with China to reverse their course in some place, in some paths. There is definitely not a mood here in Berlin or in Brussels to see China as much as in black and white as it is definitely seen broad the spectrum in Washington. That's not the case. So I do expect now those talks to start. There is an urgent need of transatlantic exchange on how we do see China and what strategy we can pursue. And then there should be action coming soon, end of the year.
Thank you. So Germany will take that sort of balancing position between the US and China, being kind of friendly with both and not antagonizing either. Is that what we are going to expect?
Well, I don't see Germany being in the position of being a balancer in here. The giants are in the fight, and yes, Germany is trying to find a third way. It's an interesting thought because it is widely debated now, also in the academic spheres, about Germany's sort of new grown impact within the EU, whether this could be of a balancing effect, even transatlantically. Quite honestly, and Jana was talking extensively about it, the German foreign policy strategy is not as evolved that I do detect any kind of clear thinking path, which we do engage in here. And don't underestimate, this is a coalition government. We don't have a National Security Council. This is slow moving and it's not in the kind of strategic league we do see Washington playing.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I have a two-finger on this, on China? Because it's not as if it was kind of that the EU has such close or good trade relations with China. It's primarily also Germany, and we should mention this here. That Germany is the elephant in the room here, also for many Europeans, and Germany has faced a lot of criticism for pushing this comprehensive agreement on investment kind of over the finishing line from smaller European member states. I mean, they have at the end all agreed, but Germany is the elephant in the room here, and a lot of Europeans criticize Germany for basically having its own national interest and not the EU interest in mind. And so I think if Germany would move its China policy, the EU or others would move too. And Germany faces, as I said, a lot of criticism. Germany wants to find a way to work with the United States to engage China, to basically tame China through international institutions or the multilateral system. They want to avoid, or we want to avoid decoupling. But still, I think, and for Merkel never did what Stefan just said. Merkel never looked at China kind of through the lens of this is systemic rivalry. She has been the architect of close relations with China. I mean, of course, she's seen that the Chinese government has changed, but throughout her career, relationship with China was very important to her personally, and she pushed for that. And the relationship with China was also supposed to be the cornerstone of the German EU presidency before COVID in foreign policy. So this relationship is Merkel-made. And I think the Germans need to change their position, but that's my personal opinion.
Well, they will certainly change their governments in September, I would say, after maybe a new approach we will see after the elections in late September. But let's open it up to questions from the audience. Brianna and Laurel, I'm sure you have had plenty of questions as far as I can see. Laurel, do you want to ask the first one?
Sure. So one of the first questions we have asks, are any foreign interests attempting to influence German elections like we've seen in the United States?
Michael, do you want to try?
Well, we have various cyber attacks on German Bundestag, on political institutions. We do not have seen in the past large-scale cyber attacks on elections, which is comparable to what happened in the United States. But it's clear that political institutions and also big companies are the target of foreign hackers. So influence is there. It's Russia, it's China, it's Iran, it's North Korea. But it's nothing comparable to with 2016 in the US, as far as I can see.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to come in here? No. Brianna, can you ask the next question?
Yes, David Litt asks, with Black-Green coalition, could Greens get foreign ministry?
Yes, Jana.
I think they could. Traditionally, the junior, assuming that they will be the junior partner, which I think at this moment is pretty likely. There were some scenarios when the Green were really going big in the polls that we could even have a Green Chancellor. I don't think it's very likely. So the tradition is that usually the smaller coalition partner gets the foreign ministry. The interesting question will be whether the Greens want the foreign ministry, because you have seen a shift of power quite significantly over the last years and under Merkel. So, for example, when it comes to EU affairs, it's really the Chancellery or the Finance Ministry who call the shots. And the big foreign policy decisions, if they have been made in the past, have been made in the Chancellery. So, as I said, Merkel holds the strings on China, on Russia, on the United States. So, I mean, I won't say that Heiko Maas is a puppet, but he is not the most relevant figure in the German government. So I think foreign minister is a prestigious job. It's nice, but it's not where the power lies. And I could very well envision that the Greens aim for something different because they really want to be able to, to call the shots at least partly. So.
Makes sense.
If I might just add this one, Annalena Baerbock, the female leader of the Green Party, and Michael was referring to her, and you saw her in the picture earlier. She has a foreign policy background, and she would definitely be keen to get the job, take the job, and that's actually something Söder is looking forward to, because he is not that experienced in foreign policy. Would actually give her probably a little bit more breathing room. And on the others, and then again, the Greens are extremely realist in foreign policy. They have a leadership structure which is quite remarkably down to earth in foreign policy issues. Could be rather conservative, honestly. And Annalena Baerbock would therefore be, in my view, pretty respectable foreign minister.
Has Joschka Fischer still any influence in the Green Party's foreign policy direction?
Yeah, you just had him last Monday in a call. I was surprised to see him. He's not appearing too frequently.
So
no, I think he has lost part of his influence. He was still very close to Cem Özdemir. So when we tried to form our last government with the Greens, last time it took 6 unprecedented months to form a German government. There was a first attempt to include the Greens and the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party stepped out of the negotiations, so this failed. But there was rumor for some time that a Green politician would be our next foreign minister. And he was still very close to Joschka Fischer. But Stefan, I'm not so sure if Annalena Baerbock really aims at foreign ministry. I think I have heard Greens speculating about taking the finance ministry and creating this huge ministry for digitalization, all things kind of related to the environment and to make. So I would not say that this is a given, but we will see.
Thank you. Laurel, would you ask the next question, please?
What consequences of Merkel's refugee policy do you see the coming administration having to face?
Who would like to take that? Stefan?
I mean, the immediate consequence is to keep the migrational issue under control, and with that I mean to ease the crises in the Middle East and in Northern Africa. The key reason for migration still is the lack of opportunity, or the desire to be part of the European wealth system, and definitely to escape harm. And the next administration will have to uphold the Turkish refugee agreement to keep these things under control, but then also has to work at the root causes of it. And that's something which was usually debated in 2015 when all this happened, but nothing really has emerged from that. And those camps are still there. Actually, the camps on European soil are even worse than those in Turkish under Turkish control. And in Northern Africa, the main issues of traffickers and mafia style groups, which pretty much make money with bringing people to Europe. Corona has slowed things down, and also terrorist activities in the Sahel has slowed things down. But I'm pretty sure it'll be back immediately when it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Brianna.
What would be the consequences of a green foreign policy?
Michael, that's a question for you.
Well, I think human rights, as I outlined, play an important role, and the Greens stress time and over again that they want to have a value-driven foreign policy. They want to be outspoken on the violation of human rights. They conceive themselves of being a democratic party, political participation, so they take a stance. What that means, for example, in a black-green coalition, that's another ballgame. So I think they have to make compromises. I mean, that's part of the political game. So they cannot only demand we want this and that, and that's not like policy works, but they want to make their point. And they will be more outspoken than the Christian Democrats. And if Armin Laschet is the Chancellor, I think that would be quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Can I have a two-finger, because Stefan said that the leadership is so pragmatic and so down to earth. The problem is not the leadership. With the Green Party, the problem is that this party is extremely split between the Green bases, and they come from the anti-nuclear movement, from the kind of protect the environment movement, and from the peace movement. And so the Greens leadership has room for maneuver, but only so far. And the Greens have just agreed on a new kind of program that they will stick to, and they have some hot topics in there. So they want to end nuclear sharing within the NATO framework. They demand a UN mandate for any sort of military intervention, with the exception of humanitarian interventions. They have a problem, for example, with FCAS, that's the new fighter plane that we developed with the French, because armed drones will be involved, and it's about nuclear stuff. So I think it will not be that smooth to sell that to their own people. And if the Greens enter in great numbers the Bundestag, a lot of young people will get mandates as MPs, and the young people that come in are not the pragmatists. People are not the pragmatic leadership. They are dyed-in-the-wool pacifists, and so I don't see it going as smooth as experts like. Also, I mean, I'm looking forward to this kind of coalition government, because I think it will be a change at least, but I think it will be difficult still for the Greens to make compromises that they can sell to their own party and that are pragmatic and show that they can govern at the same time.
Thank you. Tell us, we haven't talked about the far right, the AfD. What is the position or the situation for that party right now? Are they on the rise? Are they on the decline? Or how do you see their future? Stefan?
Well, the AfD is torn internally. They are in a big internal fight about their character and about the kind of right-wing exposure they allow. There's a moderate wing, there's a nationalistic wing, and there's an extremist wing. And the extremist wing is slowly taking over. Corona really hasn't helped them, even though there would be a huge audience which would flock to their party right now, because this inherent opposition towards the state, towards the authorities, towards those who are locking down, towards those who tell you what to do. That's what they joined, but they haven't found a real cohesive and convincing position on Corona and COVID. So the party at this moment gives an impression of confusion, infighting, and self-destruction. Now it's just February 17, as my computer says, and the election is still a way out, more than half a year. this can change, and there is definitely a potential, a huge potential for voters in this country. Just imagine that we will see an easing of the COVID situation with growing vaccination numbers and a growing number of economic emergencies, breakdowns of companies, of small businesses, so on and so forth. These are all latent voters for the AfD. So yes, they are there. They are divided. Right now, I don't see them playing a significant role. But in the end, there will be, in a margin, as we see them all over Europe, I guess between 10 and 15%.
So there's no chance that they will drop beneath 5% at all?
No, not at all. They stay.
Michael, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I see they don't have the push in the moment. Also, the number of refugees has been going down. And there was a correlation between the numbers rising and also the rise of the AfD, even though the origin of the AfD in 2013 was not related to refugees, but it was related to the euro. But what hit the party very hard is indeed the fractions between, they did not put the clear line between neo-Nazis and right-wing conservatives. I also see a self-destruction, but they're in a lull right now because of this party infights, but they will not go away. It's a difference, though, between East Germany and West Germany. In East Germany, they are still strong. I mean, there's still states where they have around 20+%. And in the West, it's a little bit less. Overall, the percentage point declined, but I don't see them going away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Brianna, do you want to ask the next question?
Is the critique austerity Merkel justified in the sense that her response to recession favored responsible countries like Germany at the expense of irresponsible spenders?
Jana.
It's a question for Stefan.
Oh, really? Off you go, Stefan.
I'm not an economist, but from what I understood from the financial crisis and the euro crisis, this wasn't about austerity. This was about currency and about survivability of the euro. I mean, we had countries in the south, Greece, amongst them as primary target, which was overly indebted and couldn't sustain on its own means. So it had to be bailed out and it had to be helped. But the second, this kind of aid money would have leaked into the country and disappeared in a system, in a structure, which wouldn't be healing. That second, the markets would have batted even stronger against that wield, which we saw coming up in all those, the spread which we saw coming up between, let's say, Greek bonds and German bonds. So you were in a spiral of self-destruction. And the only way to break that spiral bring that spiral getting out of control was to put in a brake, and that brake meant austerity. It meant that Greek and Italy and Spain could only survive, and Ireland at that point could only survive if they put political measures in place which would make the economy credible again for the markets, that it is worthwhile spending your money into those various bonds of those respective countries. And that was what was Merkel's argument from the very beginning, and it wasn't her enforcing stability, enforcing austerity to those countries. It was her trying to convey this logic, and it was a very tough logic, especially from a German chancellor who was branded in those countries as pretty much the goose-stepping Nazi of old times. It was a pretty tough argument, but it was an evading argument because those governments were simply avoiding telling their voters that tough measures are needed to rescue the economy. And look at the Irish example, look at the Spanish and the Portuguese example. Those economies have recovered. And look at even the Greek example. remarkable success right now. So I think this is something the historians will have to have a closer look at, but I don't see her being austerity driven.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can I just ask a question here? I noticed from one of our PhD students, Pasud, he asked a question whether Merkel being from the East, wouldn't she have been the ideal person to unify Germany rather than not to overcome that division, which we, I think, stated before? And secondly, in view of, you know, the endangered democracy in the United States, Germany, of course, has had grand coalitions, has had coalitions in one form or other, but particularly recently the grand coalition. Has that been good and supportive of democracy, or has it really weakened democracy? Who would like to try? Michael.
Well, I think that grand coalitions should not be the permanent solution. Actually, grand coalition is for emergency times, where you have something like a national pact of government in order to solve a big problem. And I think that the grand coalition is not favoring debates and discussions. So I think I would look forward to a new government of Germany, which is not a grand coalition. And I think that a black-green coalition would be vibrant and would shake up things. It would be much better than a red-green government, which I think would be not very healthy for the development of this country. The first part of the question I didn't quite understand. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, that was a question. Merkel being originally from East Germany, wouldn't she have been the ideal chancellor to unite the country rather than, you know, that Germany is also still divided between East and West? Politically, well, of course, culturally, spiritually, yeah.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I think she was very popular in the East, but that changed because the dissatisfaction in the East is still very high with the inequality of loans. There is a lot of complaint that the pensions are not still having the same level as in the West. There are not big companies in the East. And, you know, it's a great level of complaint in the East. So that's very difficult. But I think the unification, if you're talking about the reunification, that's not something one person of Germany can do. You need to have an international constellation as we had in '89. But in the East, it's a level of dissatisfaction which is still the case. And as I said, the AfD is much stronger in the East than in the West, and that is not something one person can bridge the gap.
You think it's just a matter of time? In 20, 30 years, things will be more united than they are now?
Yeah, yes, I think it takes several generations. As a matter of fact, in my career, I worked 3 years in Thuringia. And the hypothesis I had was, the intriguing question was, are we one people after 25 years, 25, 30 years? And when I talk to the East Germans, I'm coming from the West, I felt that it's taking longer. We are not yet one people. Also, the perception, for example, of Vladimir Putin is very different in the East than in the West. In East Germany, there's much more comprehension for Putin than in the West, because they got used to these guys for many decades, and so they have another comprehension of Putin. No, it takes several generations.
Thank you. Laurel, do you want to go and ask the next one?
The red-green coalition, when a majority, how would that impact German security policy in the future? Would we see a radical shift?
Jana.
Yeah, quite likely. But then again, maybe no, because as I said, Germany is a status quo power, very much so. And basically, I mean, we have seen a coalition between the SPD and the Greens before, and they did Kosovo. They supported basically a NATO mission without a UN mandate. So coming back to the Greens being pragmatists when it really counts. The wild card here is two things. It's the left party, who has security and defense policy-wise. I mean, I don't even see them joining that coalition if they don't move on their quite fundamental positions. They even opposed when we had this mission of ships to accompany the demolition of Syrian chemical weapons, and just the ships that protected basically that mission. The left party was against that mission. So there is a timid attempt by some now to maybe start this debate in the left party, but I think they are really not ready to govern. So I think if they don't move on that positions, I don't even see them joining a coalition government. The other thing that worries me in such a coalition is that the SPD has taken that turn towards the left in security and defense policy. As I said, because in the Grand Coalition, the SPD was looking for ways to sharpen their profile. And they went back to that old narrative that they were kind of Germany's true peace party. But when you listen to the new not so new any longer, but the party leaders and the people who really have a say in the party on security and defense, they are primarily questioning nuclear sharing right now. They are primarily against 2%. They just said that 8 years of a debate whether to procure armed drones was not enough public debate, and we need to have another debate. So they were postponing decisions, crucial decisions, not only on armed drones, but also on the tornado replacement to ensure nuclear sharing. So I see in such a coalition, I would see a lot of trends that would pull Germany to becoming not a reliable ally in NATO any longer. But at the same time, I don't see that coalition happening for exactly that reason. Yeah. But
Thank you. Let me just ask a question which was posed by Benjamin Pommer, who is a visiting German military officer here nearby at Fort Bragg. And he says, that the NATO 2030 report says that the NATO branch should really be strengthened and should be made strong in all membership countries and all alliance countries. Has the German government really done that? And has the German government made the German people aware how important both alliance relations and foreign relations as such are in comparison with, let's, domestic economic policy and things which affect people domestically? But has the German government neglected NATO and foreign relations in making it clear to the German public how important that is? Stefan.
Well, the 2% goal, NATO and defense spending was a hotly debated issue over the past years, but definitely, and Jana pointed out to that earlier, the government always sort of double-tongued with this. You have both sides. You do have this kind of hesitational moment, this kind of inner resistance to spending more and to be more committing to NATO and defense. And on the other side, you have this commitment, yes, there will be 2%, it won't be that fast, and think about the neighbors, think about the imbalance you cause in Europe. If you spend too much, we can't even spend that much. And then look at the budget. I mean, it's increasing, it's exempted from all cuts. So defense is sort of somewhere in between. What I much more miss is that kind of debate. What are we going to use this for? What is that might made for? And how do we use Germany's spending? And this is a lot of money which we're talking about. What are we using it for to sort of form some coherent strategic pattern for Europe at all? I mean, we are talking about nations joining forces to do things, but what things are we envisioning? What are we wanting to do? There are extremely painful shortages in German military hardware supply. There are no helicopters flying. There are problems with new rifles. There are the whole drone issue is just a mess. I mean, yes, there needs a lot to be done, and it boils down, but don't expect it to be done in an election year. We're talking about defense and security issues in a campaign year, and that's truly the Achilles heel. This is something where all parties feel vulnerable, because there's this unknown number of Germans who have this pacifist impetus, which is not being overcome. And it truly needs a new chancellor who stands for that goal and who makes the case why it is important for a nation as big and important as Germany to have a military and to use it wisely.
Okay, thank you very much. Michael, do you want to respond to that as well?
Yes, I think, I mean, the pacifistic reflex in Germany, as Stefan said, I think this is one major factor. And I see, if I'm talking to members of government, that there is a strong focus on conflict resolution, on, for example, of educating or of training troops in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the Sahel zone. So it's more the training aspect, it's more the aspect of civil building, which is prevalent in German politics, but it's not a strategic debate. What do you use for political power, civil power, and military power? I think there is not a debate going on. And of course, in an election year, I don't see it either. And I doubt that it will come after the election.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we have the next question? Was that Brianna?
Okay, what will the next German government do about the illiberal policies of Poland and Hungary in the EU?
Who wants to have a go? Stefan?
I can give a quick answer. No. For various reasons. I mean, look at the party system. It's much more stable than East. There were several factors which caused the rise in Hungary and Poland. And there were actually leaders who pushed it. Then those democracies were not as sort of rooted and stable as here. You have a different media system, you have a different legal system. So the short answer is, I don't see the danger.
Okay, thank you very much. Would everyone agree with that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Laurel, do you have another question?
Sure. Kind of coming back to that one, someone asked if populism is likely to grow in Germany as it is nearby in Poland and Hungary.
I think Stefan has answered this when addressing the AfD, saying that there still is a lot of potential in Germany that the AfD could mobilize, but that at the moment they just don't have kind of a winning topic, how to kind of really get to the German population. But I think Stefan is absolutely right in mentioning, so the Germans are very spoiled. We have seen 10 years of unprecedented growth in Germany. As I said, crisis all around us, huge youth unemployment in the south. Germany, nothing. So people are well off, they have jobs, they don't need to worry. And now we have this pandemic with unforeseen consequences still. And then Germany has mobilized a huge chunk of money to ease the pain for the population, but that money ends one day. And you already see this, that small businesses complain and that shops need to close, restaurants, bars. And if this economic frustration that the Germans are not used to for many years now, I mean, we're actually since the early 2000s, we're not the sick man of Europe, but I think also because of what Stefan says, there is other problems with our economy when it comes to digitalization, modernization. So if that hits us, and at the same time, there might be other problems, then I still think there is potential for the AfD to mobilize again more people.
Thank you. That doesn't sound good. We are running out of time. We have perhaps a few minutes left to answer a few more questions, but we won't exhaust our speakers too much because they are, of course, 6 hours later than we are, as they are all based in Germany. Brianna, do you want to ask some final questions?
What steps do you see the coming administration focusing on regarding to digitalizing? I think that's the pronunciation of it.
Say it again. I didn't catch that question.
What steps do you see the coming administration focusing on regarding to the digitalizing?
The digitalization.
Digitalisierung.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to go ahead, Jana? No.
No, certainly not.
I would say not very much. It's a big issue in the political talk about digitalization in Germany. But if you travel across the country, you see that the connection is very bad. And sometimes you wonder how an export champion like Germany has such a bad digital system. So they need to hurry up and they need to tackle this problem, but they have been talking too long.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a lot of complacency about, and it's mostly in the bureaucracy, because I mean the economic well-being that Jana mentioned is simply has a flip side, and that's the country is simply pretty happy how it is. It's all about now. The lockdown has showed us that things are probably not that well organized, especially now on the vaccine issue and also on like homeschooling and digital homeschooling. It's slowly catching up. Germany takes a bit more time, but in the end, it'll do things properly. So yes, again, the next government will have digitalization as one of the #1 issues, and there's big talk of major infrastructure ministry being built. But I'm not sure how many initiatives and plans and whatever proceedings have been agreed upon over the past years to exactly do that. And what we see is what we get.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, Angela Merkel has had relatively close relations with Putin, to some extent at least. So a new German chancellor will not have the language skills and will not have that long familiarity with Putin, which was built up over the last 15 years with, dubious results, but still. So can we expect some major changes regarding relations with Russia? And will Nord Stream 2 perhaps not, even if it is finalized, will it perhaps never be put into use in view of keeping on the good side of the United States? So how do you see relations with Russia?
Jana should speak about Nord Stream. I just say one sentence. Probably it's not the next German chancellor who has to focus on Putin, but it's Germany having to focus on the next Russian president. That might be the other problem.
But will there be another Russian president? Probably not. Are you optimistic?
I mean, nobody lives forever, so there will be the day. We just have to wait long enough. But so I'm worried actually about Germany's Russia policy right now. I don't see radical shifts because, again, as I said, Germans don't like radical shifts. And as I said, Merkel has had this kind of two-track strategy all along. So she did Nord Stream 2 while at the same time talking tough with Putin and keeping the EU together on sanctions. But the factors that you mentioned are right. So I think Merkel understood Putin in a way that Armin Laschet does not so far. Maybe he can learn, but what he said about the Putin government to me sounds closer. I mean, if you look at what he said in the past, but not that long ago, when he organized the so-called Petersburg Dialogue in North Rhine-Westphalia, sounds more like some things that Gerhard Schröder had said than things that the Green Party would say or Angela Merkel would subscribe to. So I think the dose of realism that Merkel has, I don't know if that is present in the CDU more broadly. There have been some attempts of people to have more, accommodating statements. Also, Johann Wadefuhl has written an op-ed with rather bad timing. But more broadly, Germany right now seeks a way to find a solution with the United States on Nord Stream 2, because Germany wants to have good relationships with the United States, but also kind of domestically, it will be a tough sell to tell people, so we are stopping this project right now because of American secondary sanctions. So Germany right now is in a very bad position, between being squeezed between the American secondary sanctions and at the other hand, having this pipeline, which I think many people have regretted, a big deal by now that was ever agreed. And Germany, I think, right now looks for a face-saving solution. Proposals on the table are going in the direction to finish maybe the pipeline, but then to negotiate a deal with the Americans under which circumstances this could be activated. The Greens, if they enter the next coalition government, they are extremely against Nord Stream 2. They want to end the project. But I think if the German government would have liked to end the project, they could have used the Navalny case to do so. And they have let this occasion pass. And so I don't see a politician having basically the guts to end this and the willingness. So on Russia, I see us muddling through as we did.
And
but
muddling through too.
Some observers say that we will be maybe more to the pre-2014. Let's try to have a reset with Russia wherever that is possible again. I don't know yet, but I see where these people are coming from and what they fear. Because Merkel was able to keep the EU together on sanctions. I don't know if her successor will have that power also within the European Union.
Thank you.
I think that Nord Stream 2 will be finalized if we have a Christian democratic government, no matter if it's Laschet or Söder, who will be the chancellor. What they will try to link it to is the Ukrainian issue. They will say if Russia puts pressure on Ukraine, stopping the gas delivery through the pipelines, through the landline pipelines, then they might stop the gas through Nord Stream 2. So they might link the issue to not let Ukraine down. This is the face-saving solution they're going for, and they think that they might sell this to Biden.
Thank you. Toward the end of our session, and we are rapidly coming to the end, I would like our three excellent speakers maybe to make a final kind of concluding statement by telling us, and that is the title of our session was An Unpredictable Germany in the Future. So will Germany be more unpredictable in the post-Merkel era, or will it be a more important international power, a more engaged international power, or will it just be muddling through, as Jana just indicated? Perhaps if all of you would give us your main thinking about that, that would be great. Let's start with let's start with Jana.
If all goes according to plan and we don't see surprises, I think every new German government will try not to be the bringer of big surprises, because that attitude that Stefan, I think, explained a while ago, that the Germans under Merkel, but I think even before, like to be liked in the European Union. They like to be the honest broker, they like to bring parties together, and they like to be a reliable partner. So I think that the German political elite more broadly has basically learned one lesson out of our not very glorious past, and that is never alone. Basically, it's two. It's never alone and never again. And I think that Germany and all the German political establishment really values partnerships a lot. So I think unpredictable is something that Germans definitely don't want to be in foreign policy. But you will see occasional kind of breakouts, like with Nord Stream 2. That was kind of not a European project. Our allies in Europe, some of them hate us for that. So you will see Germany maybe not be very consistent, but by and large, I would think that we will still see much more continuity because that's how we are. That's how we operate. Status quo.
Okay, thank you very much. Michael.
Yeah, I think the new government will take its time. It will be not a quick, stable course, but let's not forget that was also not the case with Merkel. When she started out as Chancellor, she was underestimated. She made some zigzag courses, for example, modernization of the labor market in 2003 as a party chief. She proposed a very liberal approach, and later she backed down on that. It took some time for her to get a stable chancellor. And let's not forget, Germany has not a stable course per se. There are still shifts possible. If you see the West integration of Adenauer at the outset after the end of World War II, if you see the rapprochement towards the east of Willy Brandt, that's two very different approaches. You see reunification, and now the new positioning of Germany within Europe becoming more powerful. There are shifts, but nevertheless, after some time, there is a stabilization. So I think it might be a little bit it might be a little bit shaky in the beginning, but they will find their course.
Okay, that's pretty.
Klaus, you've muted yourself.
Yeah, I said that's thank you very much. I said that's a pretty optimistic prediction. Let's go to Stefan. What is your prediction?
Well, you know, the theme of Germany's unpredictability is probably as old as Germany itself. The German question is always there, lingering somewhere in the corner, and I'm not sure what this causes. I mean, I mean, books are written about this, and they're all reasonably good, and it's mostly a lot to do with geography and history, and with sometimes also something like a national character, or I'm not sure, this kind of mix of emotion and kind of romanticism combined with hardcore realpolitik and the kind of demand now that Germany should lead and be predictable. This gives us all a mix to worry about, and I worry myself if I look at the political elite and the class which is leading, and definitely doesn't bring along the tools to fulfill these tasks. But then who am I, who is Germany, basically, to judge on itself? Look at the world. There's a lot of unpredictability there. Probably just started the United States right now, which had seen 4 years of extreme unpredictability. So we should sort of sober up a little bit, look what's feasible, go back to realism, and hope the next German government will have its big doses of that.
Would you agree with Jana muddling through?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a bit of muddling through. What I think, I mean, the Germans are extremely in danger to judge, and this is what I don't like, that they always sit there and lecture and have their little scorecards handing out on what goes well and not that well. Leading in the world, or leading even in Europe, comes with a price tag, and the price tag means you're not always everybody's darling, and you have to make tough choices. You also might be nasty at another point. It might cost you. And the big challenge for Germany is to find the right balance, because historically seen, it didn't serve the country well to be trying to be the master of Europe or even the universe. And that was the darkest hour of this country's history. But then again, it simply cannot escape its fate that it's a big country and has to do some leadership.
Thank you very much indeed. This was a very enlightening discussion. Thank you very much to Michael Backfisch, to Jana Puglierin, and to Stefan Kornelius. Thanks very much for joining us despite the late hour in Germany. I much appreciate it. Also, thank very much to Laurel and Brianna for asking and moderating the questions. And thanks very much to everyone else who's still here. And there are quite a few people who have endured our 2 hours of discussion. So thanks everyone for joining us here at the Krasno Global Events Series at UNC-Chapel Hill. Our next event will be sometime in March. I will let you know. And thanks again to our 3 panelists joining us from Germany tonight. Thank you very much and good night.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.